With nationwide unrest surrounding the BLM protests, there has begun this national conversation regarding America's racist past and, well, present. We are seeing statues being torn down. We're seeing certain companies pulling films from their streaming services and other companies who are pulling mascots from their product lines. The main question is, how do we, as a society, address America's racist past and the pieces of media and art that come from that time period? Hi, I'm AJ, and in this video, I'm going to discuss the question, what do we do about old racist media and monuments? We all know that America has a pretty bad history when it comes to racism, particularly in art and media. As such, it can be hard to navigate and determine how we portray and discuss the past when it comes to racism. One side says that while these statues represent bad ideas and the mascots and media come from a dark past, we should still keep them around because they are part of history, because they are recognizable and memorable. They say that if you remove them, you are removing history. The other side says to destroy it all. They insist that these things are monuments to white supremacy and that as such, they should be torn down, destroyed, burned to the ground, and that as we move forward towards racial equality, these things cannot be around, as they have no place in the world that we seek to create. Now let me give my 2 cents. While I agree with those who advocate for the removal of Confederate monuments and symbols, along with the decisions of companies to move away from mascots with racist origins, I do not agree that these should be destroyed. While I strongly disagree with those advocating for keeping the monuments of a bygone era of bad ideals up, I do believe in preserving these things to help educate about the not-so-distant past. I believe that we should preserve pieces of the past without glorifying what they represent. As a history nerd, I see lots of value in pieces of the past, so I can't advocate for carelessly tossing them aside because they're bad. While I personally find the tearing down of statues to be meaningful, it's ultimately pointless in terms of moving towards equality, in my personal opinion. My internal cynical nature struggles to see it as more than symbolic political theatrics that don't actually do anything substantive in terms of concrete change. While it's meaningful to some, for me, it's I'm glad it's happening, but I can't offer much beyond that. Here's the thing. We all know that America has a brutal and evil history of racism. This is even more prevalent when you see the media and art that was produced throughout the history of the nation. Unfortunately, a lot of this racist media was important to the growth of American music and media. For example, Al Jolson is known for his blackface performances, but he is also one of the most important performers in the history of American music, and would go on to be an inspiration for other important artists long after his time. Minstrel shows, for another example, were one of the foundational elements of American musical theater and would be an important part of the history of Broadway musicals. Cartoons from back in the day were incredibly racist, but they were also an important part of the history of animation. They were also a good window into the mindset of America during that time, as it was designed for kids that lived during that time period. Like all art, racist art helps us understand the minds of those behind it. While I do not promote these as good art to be adored and admonished, I do look at them as bad art to be observed and learned from. There is a lot that can be learned from these things. The Censored 11 comes to mind. These were 11 cartoons so racist that they were pulled from syndication and are pretty rare to find today, as you can really only find them in YouTube videos or on Dailymotion. While they are incredibly offensive and absolutely cringe-inducing, they are also quite interesting from a historical perspective, as they rely heavily on repetitive stereotypes of Black people and rely on the views that white America had of us. Another example can be the Amos and Andy show, along with many other early Black appearances on television and film. These roles were highly stereotypical and incredibly racist. Black folks at the time were obviously bothered by these blatant stereotypes, but many of them worked on the shows anyway, even if they really didn't like the content of the writing. These were jobs for Black people where very few existed. And even in spite of the way they were portrayed, many Black people were still excited to see themselves, to see their people that look like them, on television. This is the kind of nuance that complicates these things. It's the kind of nuance that I find lacking in a lot of political discussions in media and on the internet today. While these were obviously bad, I do not believe that these should be destroyed or discarded. HBO removing Gone with the Wind from their streaming service is one of the most recent examples of this point of discussion. From my perspective, I believe that while this is understandable, this act is more theater than any real anti-racist activism. They even said that they were going to bring it back, and they would have some kind of new intro with somebody to give historical perspective on it, which I can respect, but I also kind of find it strange because people are just gonna skip that intro anyway. I just feel like what they're doing is toothless and pointless, even though it is understandable. While this move is meaningful to some, I just see this as them coming off as virtuous and woke. It's not much more than that in my opinion. I kind of enjoy watching these old cartoons and shows in a sort of ironic way, admittedly. They aren't very funny or well written, and they make me greatly question the sense of humor of old America. But they are interesting to look at as direct pieces of history, not secondhand stories, but first-hand direct viewing. Now, many people have said that these racist monuments and media and symbols belong in a museum, not out in the public square, not to be out for people to view or companies to benefit from, and I agree with this. The Jim Crow Museum is an excellent example of this in action. The museum holds a cacophony of pieces from the history of American racism, educating on the history of Black oppression and white supremacist violence. It's sort of like the Holocaust Museum, you know? It tells the story of how Black people struggled under the boot of oppression and how we overcame and rose to where we are today. It tells the story of struggle and hope in spite of darkness, a story that defines Black America. What the Jim Crow Museum proves is that it is possible to preserve these things without promoting them. thus allowing us to learn from them in a way that academia cannot do for us. I believe that there should be more museums like this, places that teach us the dark, harsh past and allowing us to take this history and create a better future. I think that there are ways to keep racist media such as web resources and maybe virtual museums of the sort, and using them as a way to educate on their horrendous content. Now I'll end with this. History isn't pretty. Keeping only the pretty parts of history creates a sanitized PBS Kids kind of version of history that can lead to a lot of misunderstandings of historical events, which can lead to even bigger problems down the road. For example, we all know about the video games, movies, television shows, and what have you, documentaries and everything that portray war as cool, awesome, manly, a good thing to do, super epic, you know? And they just totally fail to address the realities of war, the socioeconomic realities of war, the psychological toll that it takes on the soldier, and the day-to-day horrors of war for everyone involved, and the results thereof. And that can lead to problems in terms of people's understanding of war and the jingoistic views of warfare that we are seeing in our society today. The views that lead to people dying. So, safe to say, it's important to preserve the parts of history that are painful to struggle with. I also feel like discarding pieces of past racism actually would turn around to benefit racists, particularly the quote-unquote colorblind, I don't see race type of people, as it allows them to obfuscate on racism and paint a sanitized view of history where Jim Crow and slavery and whatnot were not that bad, quote unquote, and black people just kind of need to get over it and whatnot. These things are evidence of that past, evidence of the pervasiveness of these stereotypes, evidence of how white America viewed our people, evidence of what black people went through. Keeping these things is holding on to the evidence that cannot be denied, that America was not just kind of racist, it was extremely racist, and that racism is pervasive even today. If we want to be able to look back at the past and learn from it, it is important to keep the things that remind us of where we came from, even if they are painful. Yet, if we want to move forward as a society, it is very important that we let go of our attachment to these things, because we cannot take them with us where we want to be as a society. If we want to be better, we need to let go of those things because they are weighing us down. They are holding us back. They are part of an ideology that is keeping America from actually being as great as it thinks it is. If we can't let go of symbols of past racism, how can we possibly let go of present racism? Letting go of those things, letting go of our attachment, is a major step in moving forward as a society, as moving past those narratives and those ideas. So, thanks for watching. I hope this video got you thinking. And as always, Black Lives Matter. I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.